Okay, so I'm Jacob, and this is my presentation on my cell model. So, on this first slide, I'm going to talk about what cells are and how they help us. So, cells are basically living building blocks. They're the basis for all living life. So, you see every living being. Like bacteria, there are single-cell organisms, but they're still made up of a cell. So like humans, made up of cells, everything's made up of cells. And cells carry out different tasks depending on the area that the cell is located on multicellular organisms. So, like your tongue cell does something different. Well, they have the same process, but they actually achieve different things than like your skin cells and your red blood cells, stuff like that. And the tasks are all essential for the living being. So, like the wall of your stomach is protective against the stomach acid, and your brain is kind of obviously pretty important. So yeah. All right. So this is my second slide. In this slide, this is my plant cell, and I'm going to be explaining to you. See plant cell, but I'm going to be explaining to you what each thing is on a plant cell and what it does. So, first off, we have the cell wall here. It's made out of paper. And, well, that's actually kind of fitting because the cell wall is like it structures the whole cell, which is nice because the paper is put in a way so that it makes like a little ridge around it. So then my cell membrane, it's a plastic bag that's been cut out. The cell membrane is, it's good for, it keeps things out that are supposed to be out, and it lets things in that are supposed to go in. So basically, it protects the cell from outside forces. Then I have the nucleus, and the nucleus is actually inside-out half of a tennis ball, and the nucleus is basically like the control center of the cell. It controls everything. It's where the DNA is, everything pretty much circles around the nucleus. Then we have chloroplasts. It's this little snapped up pencil here. Chloroplasts, are little things on the more top end of the cell. They ridge all the way around the plant cell, and they create energy through photosynthesis, which is basically sun energy. So then I have the cytoplasm. Now the cytoplasm is interesting. The cytoplasm is the green felt. And cytoplasm is actually pretty interesting because, first off, well, it lets things kind of float around, because otherwise it would be empty, and so everything would just be kind of, not really doing much. But anyway, also, in the cytoplasm, little chemical reactions happen that are actually pretty useful for the cell. And the mitochondria are these little shreds of paper. And mitochondria are the mitochondria create and store energy. So they're in both plant and animal cells. Most of the stuff is, but yeah. So here I have my animal cell. And as you can see, it's actually rather smaller than the plant cell. And it has actually a couple less things. For instance, we don't have the cell wall here made of paper. We only have the cell membrane. And that's because a cell wall makes it rigid so that it can't move. That's why plants can't move. That's also why animals are like a lot softer than plants usually. So then I also don't have chloroplasts because animals have to depend on getting they have to depend on getting food instead of actually creating it themselves from the sun. But besides that, we have the mitochondria creating and storing energy. We have the nucleus, command center. We have the cell membrane, and we have the cytoplasm. Okay, so on this slide, I'm going to talk about the similarities between my school here. This is a solar panel, by the way, and a plant cell. Now, we're going to start with the cell wall. The cell wall of a plant cell is kind of like the walls of the building, the architecture, what's holding it up, because it keeps the wall it keeps the building stiff. Next, we have the cell membrane. The cell membrane, I believe, is kind of like the doors and the windows, because without doors and windows, you couldn't get into a building. But you can still close them and lock them so that people can't get in. Next, we have the nucleus. The nucleus is kind of like the secretary's office because it relays information to other places, like the principal's office, and all around pretty much controls what's happening. And without it, we wouldn't actually be able to really have a school. Next, we have the chloroplasts. The chloroplasts are kind of like the cafeteria, like the cooks, because they create the food. Next, we have cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is kind of like the hallways, because the hallways are what let people move around from room to room, and the mitochondria are kind of like they're kind of like the actual lunch, people having lunch, the storage, the cafeteria. I'd say the chloroplasts are more like the chefs, but the mitochondria is more like the cafeteria because it stores the food and it releases the food. So, yeah. So, in this slide, I'm going to tell you the similarities between an animal cell and a bicycle. So, I believe that the membrane is kind of like the chassis and the protective gear, like on the person, because otherwise, you wouldn't really be able to get onto a bicycle, and you really can't get anything off the bicycle, so without the chassis, you can't really do stuff with the wheels or anything. Next, we have the nucleus. I believe that the nucleus is kind of like the person riding on the bike, because they're in complete control of the bike. Next, we have the mitochondria. I believe the mitochondria is kind of like the bicycle pedals, because it creates the energy. Well, the bicycle pedals and the wheels, because the bicycle, it pedals, creating the energy, and the wheels spin and kind of store the energy and continue. Then we have the cytoplasm. I believe the cytoplasm is kind of like, again, the chassis, because it is what is kind of holding the whole thing together. Not really cell membrane, but it's basically what the whole thing is kind of grouped together by.